welcome everybody to the first Lusk Perspectives of 2021. Great seeing you all. My name is Richard Green. I'm director of the USC Lusk Center for Real Estate. And it pleases me that our first event will be a conversation with our new leadership. But before I introduce our new leadership, let me again acknowledge Emil Haddad for the great work he did his 3 years as chair of the Lusk Center. We are now on a 3-year term for chairs and vice chairs of the Lusk Center Advisory Board. And I can't help but think about the fact that Emil, in our last live session together, opened the session by saying, I think this looks really bad. And this is before we all knew that it was going to be really bad. And so our new leadership has a high bar to clear in terms of their ability to prognosticate. And let's hope that the first words out of their mouths are not going to be, this is going to be really bad. This is a spontaneous conversation, or as if you remember from the days when Meet the Press was hosted by Lawrence Spivak, which was when I was a kid, which will tell you, one, how old I am, and two, what kind of weird kid I was. This is an unrehearsed conversation. So Bill and Nadine and I are just going to talk, but we are also going to elevate everybody in the room to panel status. So if you want to just barge in with a thought, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can use the chat function or the Q&A function, and I will make sure to pass your thoughts on along to our panelists. So the new leadership of the Lusk Center are people everybody in this room knows well. Bill Witte, the chairman, CEO, and founder of Related California, that has done all sorts of stuff, particularly well known for mixed use development and affordable housing development, along with not so affordable housing development here throughout California. And Nadine Watt, who is now the chief executive officer of the Watt companies. And I think that's the first time I've been able to introduce you with that particular well-deserved title. Nadine has been part of us since long before I became director of the Lusk Center, which was nearly 13 years ago. Her family, of course, has been very important to the USC community for some time, and she has various leadership roles at the university. So Bill and Nadine, great to see you both, and thanks for spending time with us today. So I'm going to start with the chair, Bill, and then move on to the vice chair, Nadine. And I just want to start with a fairly simple question. As I said, Emil said to us nearly a year ago, things look pretty bad. How do you think things are looking at the moment? And you may answer that question any way you see fit. So Bill, let me start with you.
Well, first of all, as I think others have commented, I think the challenges we have today are very, very different from the previous recession. It's not a supply and demand question. It's COVID induced. There are, business challenges in the state and in local government. But the metrics in terms of markets are far better than they were in the previous recession. So I'm going to resist the urge to attempt to prognosticate specifically, because I view that as kind of a fool's errand. You can only look bad. I will say this. We are fairly bullish on the future of commercial real estate, including apartments and, in a modified way, office. But it's not going to happen in a year. I mean, if rents have dropped 25 to 30%, even when the market improves as we think it will, you're not going to increase them back by 25 or 30% in one gulp. The second thing that we believe is that, as in any slowdown, with supply decreasing, there's going to be less competition for those who can weather the storm and move forward. And then the last comment I would make is that some of this isn't just about markets, but it's about the response from government. Now, we're seeing a very ambitious response from the Biden administration at the federal level, exactly what gets approved and what comes down the pike, including on infrastructure, which hasn't come out yet, will have some bearing on how things recover and where they recover. But in California, the positions or actions of state and local government, which have gotten a lot of attention recently, will be very significant. For example, in one of our core markets in San Francisco, and perhaps one could argue in downtown LA, how the cities deal with social issues, including homeless, will have some bearing on how the market can move forward, more so than in other submarkets. What, if anything, the state does? At the moment, perhaps doing nothing would be preferable to taking some of the actions that are being proposed. So that's sort of a long-winded way of how we look at things. The last comment I would make is, for all the talk about people leaving, the high-end for sale markets, at least outside the urban cores, are booming at rates we almost haven't seen before. So there's still a lot of money in California.
So Bill, let me, you said you don't want to prognosticate, but there's a way in which you must, which is presumably your company does pro formas to think about things going forward, which is a type of forecast. So without giving away the company's secrets, can you say how you've changed your modeling going forward as you think about the development that you're doing?
Well, I'd say a couple of things. Whether it's a short-term or slightly longer-term response to the situation, higher end or well-located suburban markets, which we've typically stayed out of, are generating a little more interest for us, not in lieu of the cities, but in addition to. And that's a function of two things. One, we've seen, even with one lower scale project we're doing in San Francisco that has a lot more open space, a greater interest in the market on a little more room, a little more space, things of that nature. That's not a complete change from before, but it's something that we've observed. Second thing is demographics, which always drive demand at some level. And while through, as I understand it, 2024, there's still a significant millennial population, which helped drive the rental demand in the last decade. As the millennial population ages, with or without COVID, there's always been and always will be some move to home ownership, some move to the suburbs for social and other conditions. And I think that's affecting what we see demand in these locations as well. And finally, whether it be Silicon Valley or West LA, we'll be watching to see what the major employers do. There still seems to be growth among the big tech companies and certainly the biotech world, regardless of the negative press about California. How deep does that go? How extensive is that? I see Michael Barker on the call, who's, an experienced office guy. Be interesting to see, how that progresses. So that's beginning to frame how we're looking at things perhaps a little differently.
So Nadine, give us your peek around the corner.
We are fortunate to be in a lot of different asset types, right? Between home building, commercial, industrial, apartment, office. So, we're seeing a lot of different things. 7 sales a week in the home building division, right? That's big numbers that we hadn't seen previously. Our industrial, 100% occupied, 100% paying rent. Our apartments, Class A, 95% are paying rent. And
excuse me, Nadine, 95% is just normal, right? Is
yes,
that's what you would get under normal, even without COVID?
Correct. But Class B, you're getting lower to 89%, and Class C, you're closer to 82, 81%. So it varies by your asset, your ABC level of apartment. Office, very, very challenging, especially our high rise office, but so our low rise as well. Definitely seeing challenges, occupancy dropping, rates dropping, and closer to 80% of people paying rent and and only 20% are even coming into the office. So, definitely it depends on where you're investing, what you're seeing happening and what you'll see going forward. I think the vaccine is going to have a huge impact, obviously, with that rollout. I think by summer, a lot more people will be going back to high-rise office, and I think that you'll see a big change there. But up till now, it's dramatic how difficult it's been.
So I want to pick up on your comment about selling 7 houses a week and how strong that is something people have talked about is the land pipeline being an issue, and that's going to sort of put the kibosh on the ability of housing to grow even more rapidly. Is that something you're seeing, that you're dealing with? What's your view about available land for sale?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely narrower pipeline. We have a couple projects in Northern California, Sacramento area, that we have about 2 years worth of build out ahead of us. So those projects will continue to sell well, I think, but we don't have a lot of other things in the pipeline to talk about, or so there will be an issue of lack of land. And to keep that velocity up of 7 homes a week is going to be impossible.
So,
but we also have an apartment project in Las Vegas that we're doing 30 leases a month. So that's 1 a day in a project we're in lease up in. I mean, and that velocity is tremendous. That doesn't happen.
So Bill, you looked like you wanted to weigh in on this.
Well, 2 different comments. One, to Nadine's point about the Las Vegas project. While rents in coastal California in Class A property, have predictably dropped, although I think with the vaccine and other things will improve, rents in Class A property in Sacramento have actually increased, literally increased. I don't mean stable. They've actually gone up. We hear a lot about the Inland Empire. It's a different market, but Sacramento is kind of a core market in a second tier. So that's just one observation about what's going on.
And what is excuse me, but what's the typology of that stuff in Sacramento? Is it high rise? Is it garden?
No, it's the urban stuff in Sacramento and West Sacramento is 4, 5, 6 story product. Obviously rents are below coastal California rents, but they've been increasing. And Sacramento, like other markets, has benefited by people for high cost or remote work reasons moving in that direction. For sale market's really strong there. Nadine can comment on that. But in the other direction, something to think about. In our affordable business, we're busier than we've ever been. And that's a function not only of the demand, but available resources at the state level. Having said that, while we talk about for sale home prices rising and all of that, at least to me, and we're not in this business, it means that if you're a first-time home buyer, good luck. And at our affordable properties, it's not unusual to see waiting lists of 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people. And so my concern is that while we're talking about all these commercial real estate metrics, that for lack of a better word, the inequality dynamic is going to continue to grow. And apart from just a societal comment, I'm concerned, we're already seeing this in progressive political places like San Francisco and Santa Monica, is that it's going to impact public policies and not necessarily in a good way. Not that there shouldn't be more focus on affordable housing. We think there should. The second thing I would say is to Nadine's comment about land availability. There's been a spate of attempts at the state level to force cities through RENA numbers and housing element analyses to provide more land for housing, including but not limited to affordable. And on the good side, and I give the governor's office some credit for that, you see cities that I'm aware of, at least like Newport Beach and Laguna Beach, never thought about this. They're actually taking it seriously to a point. On the other hand, we see a lot of cities like Santa Monica and others fighting back. Just don't tell me what to do. Leave me alone. And they're playing to sort of typical NIMBY type sentiment. So I am concerned that there are still, despite all the talk and all the agreement about we need more housing, we need more supply, we need more affordable housing, I don't necessarily see that happening at the local level. So I am concerned about public policy. Lastly, with all this state legislation, as we've discussed, putting aside whether one thinks this is good or bad, nothing comes out of the state that doesn't have a labor requirement on it. And in a lot of parts of the state, there simply isn't the contractor, subcontractor workforce to deliver on that. So I just wonder about how meaningful a lot of these statewide efforts will really be.
So I can't help but note, I have lots of data points I like to share with people, is if you go back to 1960, Los Angeles County had about 5.5 million people, and it now has about 10 million people. So not quite doubled. Santa Monica had 80,000 people in 1960. Now it has 90,000 people. So it has not kept up with, and it's an enclave, right? It's right in the middle of, and it's not in the middle of Los Angeles, but it's in the middle of economic activity in Los Angeles. And yet, so it should, if it were keeping up with the county, have at least roughly 200,000 people now. I don't see it getting there anytime soon.
Well, they're not allowing density, right? I mean, they're not doing, or market isn't density, because they're not doing high-rise, dense projects that would allow for growth in Santa Monica.
Right, exactly.
Well, the other thing is, if you look at the local elections, Santa Monica being a prime example, the local elections, not the state or federal elections in November, that in a lot of cities, they've become significantly more progressive, however one defines that, than they were before. And as Nadine suggests in Santa Monica, progressive is not always a meaningful term, because you can pretend to be progressive, but you're really just anti-growth. So I don't know if that's progressive.
So I wonder, this is a question for both of you. How much more housing do you think we could build in California before we got ahead of our skis? How far away double, triple, and I don't mean the stock, I mean per year. How much room do you think, if zoning allowed it, there would be for more housing in California, just because of demand?
Well, the last person who used a number like that was Governor Newsom. And he's now getting ridiculed for saying we're going to build 3 million housing units a year. So at the risk of avoiding ridicule, I'm not going to propose a number. I would just say that I'm not an advocate of statewide housing policy. It's politically difficult. This is a very complicated, diverse state. So I tend to look at it regionally, which is how markets and submarkets occur. And, there's just realities. You're not going to build more high rise along the coast. You're just not, politically. So the question is, where do you focus your efforts to get to that? And I think the answer is twofold. One, the cities, the Newport Beaches of the world can do more. They're not going to move the needle, but they certainly can do more. And they're at least outwardly trying to take it seriously. Like in Newport, build near the airport. No, you're not going to build on the coast, but there is some room. To me, the real fights are going to be in the suburban areas. I don't know how to answer the question without looking at the political realities. The city of San Mateo, pretty big city in the peninsula in the Bay Area, had two dueling ballot measures on that would have allowed for more height. And the no growthers won. So we said, we think we're in this pro-housing climate, but at least outside some of the urban areas, I'm not seeing it. Downtown LA, you can build till the cows come home, but that's not where the market is going to justify a lot more development. So Richard, I don't know how to answer your question without ducking it.
Nadine, you want to try to avoid ducking it?
Again, it is a political regulatory question. I don't see
Yeah, so I'm
politics allowing for the number of houses that we need or that we could sustain. I think there are corridors where we could do more dense projects, but politically they won't get passed. We're building on transit, we're building on Exposition and Crenshaw, 500 units. But there are corridors that could sustain it. It's just very, very difficult to get them built.
I will say that, Richard, one of the things that is going on, and we'll see how successful it is the lowest hanging fruit is publicly owned land. There are, in the affordable world, the governor has instituted a policy of any surplus state-owned land should go for affordable housing. We recently won an RFP, and of all places, South Lake Tahoe, to build 250 units in three projects. That's not nothing, especially in a submarket like on a surplus state site, competing on a few others. And then there are
California side or Nevada side?
California side, California side, but you know the market better than I do probably. But also there are two very large sites in Pomona, or the Pomona area, one owned by the LA County Fairgrounds where we're involved, the other by Cal Poly Pomona. So Cal Poly is not a public institution, but very large sites that are at least close enough into, it's LA County, not out in the woods somewhere, where a lot could be accomplished, and there seems to be some political will to do it. So I think the first place to start is institutional or government-controlled sites where there may be political will and control of a lot of underutilized land.
So I want to come back to a point Nadine made about her Crenshaw project, which involves infrastructure. And I think one of the problems facing California is we've way outgrown our infrastructure. If you go back 30, 40 years ago, California had, I think most people would agree, world-class infrastructure. It had the highway capacity, it had the airport capacity, it had the rail shipping capacity, it had the port capacity, and so on. Thinking forward, if you were to, and so I'm just going to ask you to use your imagination a little bit here. If you were to think about how California should expand and change its infrastructure, and try not to worry about political constraints. This is sort of I'm asking you to have a bit of a vision exercise here. What would new infrastructure in California look like? And I was particularly interested in Bill's comment about where development might happen. And it seems to me that has some implications for future infrastructure. And I'll start with Nadine on that one.
I feel like we need a better metro system, right? We need a better way to move people around. And we can't even get high-speed rail going in our state, let alone a better metro system. But if we did have good mass transit and we were building dense on those corridors, we could see some success here.
Bill?
We'll give you an example of, doesn't necessarily have to be public funding, but we have a very large, with our New York partner, site that's fully entitled that we hope to start construction on sometime this year in Santa Clara. 240-acre public golf course, but it's on landfill. So we have to build a platform over the landfill in phases to accommodate that. And the city has been good about working with us, so that's effectively our land cost. But in addition to Nadine's comment about transit and improvements to transit, I think I would add to publicly owned sites or underutilized sites for, I don't know if that's an environmental reason, but that's where you kill two birds with one stone. They haven't been available for development for, I'll call it, site constraint reasons, but are particularly well situated for development. There is already transit there as such as we have. Proximity to jobs is unbelievable. In some respects, that's how Playa Vista happened, right, Nadine? I mean, it took a while, and that's another whole discussion. So
environmental, wetland,
Right. I think some creativity and public-private partnerships can accomplish a lot in those kind of spaces. And you're cleaning up, you're improving sites that are otherwise challenging, even as you're accommodating new develop without just going into someone's single-family neighborhood.
Well, let me ask sort of a big question, which is, since Nadine, you raised high-speed rail, and I will tell you, this is something where I was for it and then I was against it because I think it's been so poorly done from everything I could tell. But one of my PhD students is writing a paper on the impact of high-speed rail in South Korea. And the impact there has been enormous, and it allows people to work in Seoul and not pay the exorbitant cost of living in Seoul. Now, South Korean Samsung actually knows how to build this stuff. It takes them less than 10 years to build a substantial line, a 200-kilometer line, which we can't even. And they, by the way, have mountains and other stuff that makes it hard to do. It's not like it's an unchallenging place to do it. Could you want to envision a world where, say, Bakersfield becomes a bedroom community for all the jobs that are in the Southern California basin? Or is this just hopeless to think about things this way?
Well, again, it's a political football because of the mismanagement of the project and the exorbitant cost. But it seems to me that's the only way we could make, sort of those bedroom communities, is to have a fast, rapid way of moving people. Traffic has been heavenly this last year, right? I mean, there's no traffic anywhere. But going forward, once the vaccine hits and everybody goes back to school and work, traffic is going to be at a standstill again. So I have sort of been a proponent of high-speed rail and being able to get to San Francisco, in 2 hours or an hour, whatever it is, that we would normally be sitting in our car for that time. You can get a lot done on the train. Or what about these new Hyperloop ideas, the test loop or whatever? I think those could be a reality at some point as well.
So Richard, let me ask this question, and maybe somebody has an answer for this. I voted for the original high-speed rail proposal. And like Nadine, I agree that it would be nice. But quite apart from quote unquote mismanagement, if any community through which this goes can challenge the proposal on EIR and environmental grounds, how are you ever going to get something approved? It's impossible. And people seem to not want to confront that. If you look at countries or that do this, the rules change. They have changed. The state has changed the rules or accommodated, some sports arenas and other things under CEQA, as long as they, pay prevailing wages or something. I'd be all for that if they would say, I'm sorry, but as long as they pay, say, prevailing wages or something, we're going to do this. If you don't have that, how is that? We're struggling to get it from the Fresno area into, wait till you get to the coast. Wait till you get to the coast. How is this ever going to get approved I'm just asking that question, not
You
whether
have
it's
to be able to wave a magic wand. Somebody just has to say, this is happening.
That's right. And so we can talk about high-speed rail till we're blue in the face. Until someone addresses that, it ain't happening.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to one of the things, cities do get to a point where they just become too big. And they're expensive simply because the value of being in the middle of the city is so great relative to being on the periphery that it's very difficult to solve the expensive big city problem. London is very expensive, Tokyo is very expensive, Seoul, etc. And so it occurs to making it easy to get access to the city and not requiring people to live there is a way to solve this problem. But without that, it's hard to see. I mean, yes, LA can be denser than it is, but LA is like every other city of its size in the world. It's expensive, and it's just hard for me to see how we solve this problem without figuring out how to transport people better and faster. I'd like to. So first of all, I want to invite the crowd to weigh in or ask questions or give opinions as they would like. And then, but before I do that, let me just turn to one more topic myself, which is the state of finance at the moment, real estate. Has COVID changed it? Do you think it's a temporary change? What are you seeing in terms of underwriting? What about sources of capital, like our debt funds becoming increasingly important relative to banks, et cetera? So just your views on real estate finance going forward as a result of the last year.
I think there's a lot of capital out there. They're all looking for a good deal. They're looking to get yield, and they're waiting for some distress that hasn't exactly come yet. Because of the eviction moratoriums, and you can't evict anybody, you can't charge a late fee, you can't charge interest, you can't do anything to get them out. You're sort of in limbo, and so people aren't seeing distress yet. But I think there will be some as soon as these moratoriums are lifted, and I think there's going to be a lot of capital out there looking for yield.
So Richard, I just listened to a presentation by one of your colleagues in the industry who made the point that I think is very true, which is, he was talking initially about inflation and how he doesn't foresee inflation in the consumer price world, buying groceries or things like that for a variety of reasons. However, there's so much money available to chase real estate that he expects, which is at least in the short run good for real estate, that there will be significant inflation in real estate because there's so much more money than viable deals. And we certainly see that too. Then you get into the weeds about, okay, how do you project underwriting and how do you trend rents in this kind of a climate? The office world is perhaps a little more vulnerable, only in that there's more swing. It's more volatile. Could be really high highs, but also low lows. If you lose a big tenant, what do you do? But there's a lot of money out there. And then the second thing I would say is, we keep hearing, funds, they're not going to invest in California. There's statewide rent control and everything. We don't see that. I'm sure there are those who believe that, or who are saying, well, we should all go to Phoenix or Texas or something like that. But historically, when these issues have come up about California or rent stabilization or this or that, we always heard the sky is falling, and then it never did. Cap rates stayed low, and I think they still will, particularly with interest rates so low. So like Nadine said, I think there's plenty of money. Whether it comes from slightly different sources or not, I don't know. And I would add, there's less, arguably, the Chinese capital has somewhat dried up, but that's not, in my opinion, all bad, because prices were surreal based on, I think, artificial demand. So at least in terms of availability of financing, I think the scenario is pretty favorable.
So in terms of, so you think things like underwriting ratios might loosen. LTVs will go up, debt covers will go down, debt yields will go down, or not so much.
Yes, I mean, but what are you comparing it with? Today they're, as you'd expect, terribly conservative. I mean, a lot of us are holding off on starting construction on projects precisely for that reason. Because how do you convince lenders, investors until the vaccine kicks in, for example, of where rents are likely to return to or something like that. But people have not soured on at least these core markets. And as I indicated, the strength in places like the Inland Empire and Sacramento, probably there'll be more capital. It may be more mobile than it was before.
Nadine, any thoughts on that?
I just was trying to think about our project in Las Vegas that we wanted to potentially bring to market early, but the pricing isn't there because we're only 30% leased. So we're going to wait until we're closer to 75 or 80% because people are still wondering, where are we? What are your real rents going to be? What is your lease up velocity going to be? Can you continue to have 30 leases a month for the next 6 months? So again, I think people are in a wait and see at this point. And in 6 months, we'll know a lot more.
So I'm curious, anyone else in the group wants to comment on sort of the state of underwriting and availability of capital going forward?
Well, Richard, let me just say one thing. Let's not forget that pre-COVID, we were pretty late in the cycle already.
Yeah.
It's not like we're about to boom and then all of a sudden COVID hit and oh boy, what do we do now? We're already there's sort of a natural correction beginning to occur, and COVID exaggerated it. And so anyway, we need to keep some perspective.
So we have about 3 minutes left. So I'd like to close by asking Nadine and Bill if they'd like to share a few words of wisdom that I have not prompted them to share. So Nadine, let me start with you.
Oh, I don't know. I think just hang on. I think I'm still bullish about Southern California, about office, about commercial property, obviously home building. I mean, I just think, hold on. How's that?
So I have to say, Nadine's comment on bullishness on office has a lot of credibility with me for the following reason. We were in a meeting together in, I think it was Aspen, 10 years ago. And some guy was saying how great the office market was. And this would have been in like 2010, right? And I remember Nadine, I think it's the first words I ever heard out of your mouth, as a matter of fact, in a meeting was, are you kidding me? We're getting slaughtered. So if Nadine is bullish on office, I actually believe that that's a real important indicator. So, Bill.
So I would just say that everybody in this call is smart people on this call. Not that much we can add. I would only say, despite all the political headaches, if sites have been good in the past, locations have been good, they're still going to be good. I don't know if that's the hang on philosophy, but it's certainly what we believe. The only other thing I would say, which has nothing to do directly with real estate is, but we see this all over the state, the broader real estate or business community, either through alliances or organization, has to do a much better job politically. We're getting out hustled and out organized at every turn. And it won't affect the value of sites, but it will help address all of those questions you asked earlier about how many units can we build and how much can we do and how much can we do this. Right now, nobody listens to us. We have to do a better job.
And with that, Bill Witte and Nadine Watt, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts with us for the last hour. Thanks so much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.